And I think what you said in your documentation is that you enable one to many plays. So you let a small team operate like a big one.
Yeah.
How does that work and what does that mean?
Um, I think fundamentally, if you take like an unscalable process and like look at making it scalable, you kind of like you open up like net new activity. So like a concrete example is, some of our customers use us to build ads where they're, building an ad for each particular store. And you couldn't do that sort of thing beforehand because it'd be just cost prohibitive, boring, your error rate would be quite high. So that sort of ability to sort of take, kind of one creative asset and like turn that into multiple assets and sort of, do both things like experimentation, which also applies to the performance side, but also like allows you to, kind of fundamentally do net new activity that I think you weren't able to do before.
Okay, that makes it. No, and I like that analogy, right? Of taking an unscalable process and making it scalable through, well, AI, audio in your case. So how do you believe that AI is doing that for, I mean, you're in technology, you're a CTO. Where do you see the same thing or the same method playing up in technology? But your teams, maybe. I mean, you have a tech team or in the tech industry, the wider tech industry.
Sorry, is your question like where do I see AI affecting kind of workflows?
Yeah, in that same space, right? Where you have an unscalable process, maybe that suddenly become, like you said, scalable. But then in our business, well, in the business of technology.
Yeah, I think like I mean, we experiment and we use a lot of the kind of modern tools of Cursor, Lovable. I think someone in the team is using pretty much every new tool that comes out. So you know, and we do a lot of sharing of knowledge about that. One thing that I think is quite scalable, so two things I think are quite scalable that like I think were kind of hard to do before is like things like spinning up testing quite quickly. So we've had quite a lot of success at like sort of reclaiming older code, like people didn't really understand. You'll put some tests on this, bring some stability, which generally would have been quite clunky and labor intensive, but also like things like rapid prototyping. So so I was doing some stuff of this recently. Rather than going to the developer team and asking for a prototype, I was able to hack it together in Cursor and have a quick prototype that we could actually have a proper conversation, internally about, oh no, but we wouldn't do it like that, or the text is wrong. And normally like that would go to like a design team and that would probably go into a roadmap. And to be honest, like some of this kind of adjacent like marketing or just experimental stuff just never got progress. Just never worked. I've seen many a roadmap where this stuff just sat there and nothing happened. So I think it's that, you know, not just like turning the unscalable into scalable, but turning the non-done work into done work, right? Like, and that's, I think, is like the kind of the underappreciated thing about a lot of AI. Like we open up like, new possibilities where we weren't able to.
So not just about speeding up the work that we were already doing before and making it slightly more efficient, but doing the work that just didn't get done before.
Yeah,
I like
of
well,
course.
nice. So and then to get on, and this is one of your, I think, your design philosophies, which I'd really like to hear more about. You talk about thin wrappers in the AI era, right? Versus thick wrappers or a thick platform. What does that mean?
My understanding of that is that you can build like very thin things around ChatGPT or whatever. You can build kind of a prototype around that. You can build these things quite fast. Um, but like I think like the real challenge becomes about, like the real challenge becomes like about, bringing in the business logic, or the kind of complexity of the business logic, and then you become, I think, a thicker wrapper, or like like a thin versus thick. And I mean thick in terms of defensibility. I mean thick in terms of complexity. I mean thick as in harder to copy, but I also mean thick as in more value, right? Because I think that's one of the things you see with a lot of these kind of like simplistic, kind of like quick moving, kind of copycats or whatever. And you see that throughout the tech space at the moment. They don't have that kind of intricacy of guardrails and the kind of more complex stuff that an enterprise will drive you towards, because it's not about the quick demo. It's about doing something reliably across a large team, and with all their different challenges and opportunities internally, whether it's regulatory, whether it's their own brand guidelines, whether it's their own, kind of like compliance needs. That's all quite complicated, and that's like a kind of a thick thing. I think that, where a lot of the value in AI era is going.
In a the thick layer that you create on top of a given AI model, whether that's ChatGPT or something else. Okay,
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, and you also have the advantage of like that the underlying models are improving, right? So you like that, the underlying models are improving. You can have like kind of backup models. That's also very important. But also like the but then the underlying business challenge is still in that kind of like more thick work where you do these kind of other components on top of. And then I think there's a further question, which is, you know, I see a lot of companies are using large language models for very complicated models for things that large language models don't need to be used for. So, there's a whole thing about pulling out that and then replacing that either with your own IP, which is one possibility, or kind of other kind of IP that's out there, which can be more cost effective and can balance things from which is a kind of important thing for like, protecting your margins and stuff like that, which is also a very important thing in itself.